For daily Ask Reddit. r/Ask Reddit. Doctors who have been in an Is Anybody Here a Doctor situation. What happened? If you like the video, drop a like and subscribe so you never miss a video. My wife and I were waiting for a plane to take off and they asked for a doc over the intercom. My wife got up and there was a guy lying in the aisle, already dead. She couldn't do anything, had to sign some forms. They got the guy off the plane and made an announcement that the guy was in stable condition, which is technically true for some definition of the word stable. I had a guy die next to me on a plane. They put the oxygen mask on him and pretended he was stable. He was a really large guy and they discussed what to do when we landed. Decided it would be too hard to get him down the aisle with everyone on board, so they emptied the plane first. Not a doctor, but I was on a flight from DC to Chicago and got so sick I passed out upon landing. As I was coming to, I was being aided by a man and heard another person shout, "Are you a doctor?" The man helping me replied, "I'm the Surgeon General of the United States." This was Vivek Murthy, and it happened around 2015. He was the kindest and humblest guy. I'm currently a first-year resident internal medicine in Sweden. This happened last year, about a year after I graduated, so I was still relatively fresh out of med school. I was flying home from my vacation from the Mediterranean, or 3-hour flight, when they announced on the speaker system that they were looking for a healthcare professional. Stood up when they called out a second time, maybe 15 seconds later. It was me and a bit older nurse who went up to the front rows, where a middle-aged male was awake but unresponsive. As I didn't really have a lot of experience and was somewhat panicking, kept the panic internally to myself. It's scary being alone. I fell back to ATLS and eventually noticed that I had a D problem, decreased strength in one of his arms and one-sided facial droop that was quite mild. Long story short, I suspected a stroke, but couldn't really do a whole lot. We were 30 minutes away from landing at the time of the initial call. They didn't deviate or anything. I didn't feel like I did that much, to be honest, except say that I suspected a stroke and asked if they could call an ambulance to the airport. The airplane seemed to land a bit faster than it usually does, and as we went off the runway, there was an ambulance waiting off the taxiway. When the ambulance staff boarded the plane, I gave a short report and that's basically it. I got a thank you from the relatives and the stewardesses. They asked me to write down my name and email, but I haven't heard anything since. Recently, before the coronavirus, I was taking an international flight. The flight attendant asked on if there was a doctor aboard. I was actually asleep, but somehow that woke me up. And I was like, wait, you need a doctor? Turns out a patient was experiencing some diffuse chest pain. Went to examine him, and minor alarm bells rang when I asked him some questions. I had a very high suspicion that this guy was having an aortic dissection. I told the flight attendant, who passed on the information to the pilot. The pilot made an emergency landing at a different airport, met with an ambulance. I later called the hospital to find out what exactly it was, and turns out I was right. If they had carried on, he might not have survived. Edit. Aortic dissection is when the aorta tears/is about to burst. My mom has had to respond twice on flights when someone was in distress. The first time was in the air and a guy was having a diabetic low. She monitored him until we landed. The second time was sitting on the tarmac when a guy had a stroke. They delayed the flight and took the dude off the plane. She also said that after the first one, the airline sent her a thank you card and said please use these enclosed vouchers to get tickets to a destination of your choosing. But they forgot to include the vouchers. She said she thought it would be rude to write back and say, hey, you forgot the vouchers. While we were on our descent, somebody lurched over in their chair and became unresponsive, tachycardic, and diaphoretic. The whole episode lasted for about 2 minutes. Then he woke up and vomited. I figured he had an arrhythmia and recommended he not take his connecting flight to Cleveland and instead go to the IMS was waiting on the ground and helped him off the plane. I actually saw him again on my return flight home. He told me he was diagnosed with an arrhythmia and made an appointment to see a cardiologist in our hometown. I was flying out of my home airport during my intern year. I had just finished my cardiology rotation, intensive care, The flight attendant asked for a doctor because a passenger had severe chest pain. It turned out there was also my senior resident and my CCU attending on the same flight, unknown to me. All three of us had worked together for the past 2 months and signed off the CCU the day before. Like a well-oiled machine, we took care of the patient. He was stable thankfully. An ambulance was waiting for him when we landed, and I was very grateful to have both my senior resident and my attending at the time.